My name is Lena Harper. The backyard in Kansas City was loud in that forced celebratory way. Birthday music thumping from a Bluetooth speaker clipped to the deck railing, fairy lights zigzagging across the old wooden fence, and the heavy smell of grilled burgers hanging in the humid evening air. Neighbors laughed too hard. Paper plates bent under the weight of food. Someone spilled beer near the patio steps, and the laughter that followed sounded more nervous than joyful. My mother, Cynthia, stood slightly above everyone else, one foot on the step like a stage. She held her wine glass high, wrist steady, smile sharp, rehearsed. When she spoke, the chatter fell away. It always did. Some children, she said, voice smooth and practiced, make you proud every single day. Her eyes locked onto my brother, Caleb. He grinned, already knowing where this was going. Someone clapped. A few people laughed like they were in on a private joke that I wasn't invited to. And others, Cynthia continued, tilting her head just enough to sting. Well, others make choices that make you wonder where you went wrong. The laughter rippled through the crowd. Not awkward laughter. Real laughter. The kind that cuts when it's directed at you. Caleb lifted his bottle in a mock toast, soaking it in. My father, Richard, stood near the grill, spatula in hand, eyes fixed on the burgers like they required his full attention. Same silence. Same avoidance. I lifted my own glass. Smiled. Good news, Mom, I said, my voice calm, almost light, the way someone might announce a small miracle without shouting. You don't have to wonder anymore. Cynthia's smile faltered. For a split second I saw something like disbelief. I moved to Charlotte 3 months ago. The music kept playing but the air shifted. You could feel it, like someone had opened a freezer door right behind the conversation. Conversations faltered. The laughter stuttered. Drinks paused midair. Caleb choked on his soda. A woman near the fence stopped chewing mid-bite. My mother's mouth stayed open half a second too long before she blinked and recovered. That's not funny, she said, voice tight. I'm not joking, I replied. New job, new lease, new life. There was silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest. The kind that makes everyone aware that this wasn't a moment for them. It was a moment for me. I set my glass on the patio table, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the back door. No yelling. No tears. No dramatics. I didn't look back. The music kept thumping. Neighbors kept talking. The party continued, but I had already left. That was the last family party I ever attended. And in that moment, I realized something I had always suspected. My mother thought she still had control over me. That she could shame me, embarrass me, make me small in front of others, and I would stay quiet. She was wrong. If a parent has ever said something about you that cut deeper than they pretended, or exactly as deep as they meant, drop it in the comments. And subscribe, because what happened next didn't start that night. It started years earlier. I grew up in a red brick house on the outskirts of Kansas City. A house with a cracked driveway from too many Midwest winters, and a garage that smelled like motor oil, old baseball gloves, and dust that hadn't moved in decades. Inside, the house ran on a silent, unspoken system. My mother ran it like a scoreboard. Every point went to Caleb. Every achievement, every success, every small victory was recorded and celebrated. His practices filled the fridge calendar. His awards filled the shelves. His stats were recited to strangers like gospel. I was background noise. My 8th birthday landed on a Tuesday. I came home from school expecting something small, maybe a grocery store cake with plastic balloons on top. The kitchen counter was empty except for a yellow sticky note. Caleb has practice. Order pizza if you're hungry. I didn't order pizza. I poured cereal into a chipped bowl and ate it standing up, milk dripping onto the linoleum. My father came home late. He loosened his tie, ruffled my hair without looking at me, and walked past. That was his version of apology. Caleb's birthdays were events. Bounce houses. Neighbors. Ribs on the grill. My mother at the gate in a sundress, telling anyone who'd listen how her son was going places. I'd sit on the porch steps, counting cars, wondering if anyone noticed I was there. No one did. And that night in the backyard, when my mother tried to remind everyone exactly where I ranked, I realized something she never expected. She thought she still had me. She was wrong. I grew up in that red brick house on the edge of Kansas City, the one with a cracked driveway that shivered under every Midwest winter, and a garage that smelled like motor oil, old baseball gloves, and a layer of dust that never seemed to leave. From the outside it looked ordinary. Inside it ran on a quiet, invisible scoreboard. My mother, Cynthia, kept track of everything. Every point went to Caleb. Every practice, every trophy, every little accomplishment was logged in her mind, and loudly celebrated. I learned quickly that the best way to survive in that house was to stay invisible. Caleb was the golden child. The one everyone noticed. Sports came first. Money came second. Attention came third, though really it was all for him. I was the shadow in his light. Birthdays were the clearest example. Caleb's birthdays were events. Big invitations, bounce houses, neighborhood kids running wild, ribs on the grill, the smell of frosting and candle smoke in the air. My mom would stand at the gate, sundress perfect, smile practiced, telling anyone who'd listen how her son was going places. She'd beam as if she were the proudest woman alive, and maybe she was. Just not for me. Mine were different. My 8th birthday landed on a Tuesday. I came home from school, hopeful for something, anything. A small cake, a balloon, maybe even a note that said, "We remembered you." Instead, the kitchen counter was empty. Only a yellow sticky note waited for me. Caleb has practice. Order pizza if you're hungry. Pizza felt like a hollow gift, so I didn't order any. I poured cereal into a chipped bowl, milk dripping onto the linoleum, and ate it standing at the counter. My father, Richard, came home late, loosened his tie, ruffled my hair without looking, and passed by. That was his version of acknowledgement. Quiet, distant, little awkward. But it was all I got. Dinner tables were battlegrounds. Caleb's achievements always took center stage. My successes, good grades, small awards, a drawing I'd been proud of, were glanced at, maybe mentioned if they didn't interfere with his news. My mother had a way of stacking accomplishments like trophies. Mine were always last, always secondary, and sometimes invisible entirely. It wasn't just birthdays. It was everyday life. The school bus ride. The soccer practices. The awards ceremony. Caleb's world was celebrated, announced, and photographed. Mine existed, but it wasn't meant to be admired. Sometimes I caught my mother watching me with that faint edge of disappointment, as if I were failing simply by being myself. Even the little things stung. Pizza night on a Tuesday. Cereal dinner. Forgotten homework acknowledgments. A passing glance from my father instead of words. Aunt Eileen, my mother's quiet sister, was the only one who noticed. She never said much, just slipped an envelope of cash under my pillow once in a while, or let me borrow books from her small library. But her gestures were subtle, silent, hidden. I started to understand something early. I would need to fight for my own validation. I couldn't wait for it from my mother, or from my father. Their love was conditional, wrapped tightly around Caleb. If I wanted to feel pride, I had to claim it myself. Some nights, I'd sit on the porch steps, counting the cars rolling down our cracked street, the porch light humming above me. I'd watch my brother in the yard, the center of attention, his voice loud and full of excitement. And me. I was part of the scenery, blending into the background, learning early that life sometimes meant hiding in plain sight until the right moment to step forward. And that was the foundation Cynthia built, intentionally or not. A household that measured worth with trophies, with accolades, with public recognition. She thought she was shaping us into success and mediocrity, but she didn't see that her rules also forged resilience, even if I didn't know it yet. Every forgotten birthday, every silent dinner, every overlooked drawing planted a seed of quiet rebellion, a seed of independence, a seed that whispered, "One day, you won't need them to see your worth. You'll build it yourself." That's what the house taught me. Not through love, not through support, but through absence, through neglect, through favoritism so glaring, so constant, that it left no choice but to learn how to survive, and eventually thrive, on my own terms. Even as a kid, I had a sense that some doors only opened if you quietly unlocked them yourself. Aunt Eileen, my mother's quiet sister, was the one who handed me the keys. She wasn't loud. She didn't lecture. She just left things in places I would notice if I was paying attention. It started with envelopes. Plain, cream-colored envelopes, slipped under my pillow or tucked into the corner of my dresser. Enough to buy small things, books, art supplies, bus passes. She never asked me to explain myself. She just trusted that I would figure out the rest. One day she handed me a library card. "Knowledge goes where money can't," she said softly. I didn't fully understand, but I believed her. That card became my ticket out of the invisible cage my mother had built. Hours in the library became my escape. I devoured books on everything from science to art, teaching myself subjects that weren't in school, subjects my mother dismissed as frivolous or unworthy. It was there, in the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the scent of old paper, that I stumbled across a flyer. Coding Club, Saturdays 10 a.m. My heart raced. Computers had always fascinated me, but I had never imagined I could touch the world behind the screen. I showed up that Saturday, shy, nervous, hoping I wouldn't embarrass myself. The first time I wrote a line of code, my life shifted. I still remember it clearly. On the screen, in plain text, it read, "Hello, Mara." Something inside me clicked. The words weren't just characters. They were acknowledgement, recognition, validation. Someone or something was listening. Could create. Could control. I could make a world that worked on rules I set. Felt electric, terrifying, beautiful. Of course, when I got home, the real world reminded me of its rules. My mother walked past my small workstation in the corner of the living room, one eyebrow raised. "Why are you wasting your time with that nonsense?" she asked, voice sharp like nails on a chalkboard. She didn't even glance at the code. It wasn't worthy of her attention. My father, Richard, saw me sitting there too. But he said nothing. He never did. Silence was his shield. Some days I thought it was protection. Other days it felt like betrayal. Still I kept going. The library, the coding club, Aunt Eileen's quiet support, they became my lifeline. While my mother celebrated Caleb's trophies and sports highlights, I built something invisible but infinitely mine. Every line of code was a small victory. Every program I completed was a secret rebellion. I remember one rainy Saturday, the house empty except for me and the hum of the heater. I finally created a small program that did what I wanted. Not for school. Not for approval. Just for me. And when it ran successfully, I laughed out loud. No one heard me. No one needed to. That laughter carried more weight than any cheer my mother had ever given Caleb. Eileen noticed my progress. She didn't say much, just left more resources. Books on algorithms, Linux manuals, even little hardware kits. She trusted me to take it further, and that trust was intoxicating. I felt seen, understood, supported in ways my parents could never provide. And slowly I realized something crucial. The world my mother valued, the one full of trophies, accolades, and public praise, was not the world I needed to conquer. I was building my own world. One that didn't require anyone else's approval. One where my worth was measured by skill, curiosity, and persistence. That small spark of independence, lit in secret by my aunt's guidance, would eventually become a fire. A fire that would burn brighter than any party, any trophy, any parental expectation. And it all started with a library card, a flyer, and the courage to type "Hello, Mara." No one could take that from me. And for the first time I felt what it meant to truly belong. Not in the world my mother controlled, but in the one I was building, line by line, program by program, in the shadows. I carved out a little corner in the basement, a space no one bothered to check. Boxes of old holiday decorations and broken furniture surrounded me, but that was fine. To me, it was freedom. A small, hidden lab where no one could interrupt, ridicule, or dismiss what I was building. I scavenged laptops from thrift stores, repaired old parts, and cobbled together servers that hummed quietly under the dim light. The smell of solder and dust became familiar, comforting even. This was my world. A world I controlled. A world where every command, every configuration was mine to shape. Learning wasn't easy. Linux commands felt like another language at first. Clustering servers made my head spin. And sometimes I'd spend hours debugging a single script with nothing to show but frustration. But every mistake was a lesson. Every error message was a teacher. And slowly, my basement became a sanctuary, a place where failure didn't sting, it instructed. My mother, of course, noticed. She never came downstairs herself, but her words found me anyway. Shouts from upstairs. "Stop wasting your time. You'll never be anything with that nonsense." Doors slammed. Threats were whispered in hallways. But the basement had its own rules, and her voice couldn't reach me the same way. I adapted. I hid deeper. I learned to time my projects when she was busy, when she was out, or when she thought I was studying or doing chores. She tried again and again to shut it down, but each attempt only made me more determined. Her control had limits. I discovered mine. Hours turned into nights, nights into weeks. Slowly the servers multiplied. Programs I had once struggled to understand now ran smoothly. I set up my own small network, experimenting with clustering and data management, building something larger than myself piece by piece. I realized I wasn't just coding. I was constructing a life outside of the one my family dictated. It wasn't just about technology. It was identity. Every line of code was a statement. I existed. Mattered. I could create something that had value even if my parents refused to see it. In those shadows I found myself. I built not for applause, not for validation, but because it was the only way to survive, to assert that I was more than what my mother's constant comparisons had made me believe. Sometimes I imagined my mother walking down the stairs and seeing everything I had built, the humming servers, the organized chaos, the quiet triumphs. But she never did. She probably never would. And that was okay. I was building for myself, not for her approval. Aunt Eileen's quiet encouragement echoed in my mind. Her trust had been the spark, but this was the fire. I wasn't just learning code. I was learning resilience, patience, and strategy. I learned to work silently, to persist when no one was watching, to turn isolation into strength. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. And in the process, something remarkable happened. I began to feel capable, confident. I realized I could create solutions where none existed, that I could make systems work the way I wanted them to, that I could carve out space in the world even if others tried to deny me entry. My identity, long buried under favoritism and neglect, was slowly emerging from the shadows. By the time I was 17, the basement wasn't just a workspace. It was a symbol that I could build, persist, and thrive in silence, that my potential wasn't tied to anyone else's validation, and that the life I wanted was mine to construct, one line of code at a time. And through it all, one truth became clear. I didn't need anyone to approve me. I didn't need applause. I just needed persistence, creativity, and the courage to keep building, even when the world above tried to pull me back down. In that hidden corner of a forgotten basement, surrounded by salvaged laptops and humming servers, I wasn't just surviving. I was becoming unstoppable. The acceptance letter to UNC Charlotte arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, folded neatly in a crisp envelope. I remember staring at it, heart pounding, as if the words inside could change the gravity of the world I was living in. Full-ride scholarship. Tuition covered. Housing included. Chance to leave everything behind. At the dinner table that evening, my mother, Denise, didn't bother to hide her disapproval. Plates clattered, forks paused midair, and she fixed me with that same sharp, practiced gaze that had haunted every childhood misstep. "You're not leaving," she said flatly, her voice slicing through the hum of the evening. I blinked. "Excuse me." I said, "You're not leaving. You think you can just—" Her words faltered, but the meaning was clear. "No. You stay here. Finish what you've started. Be realistic." My father, Ron, slouched in his chair, pretending to eat, pretending to not hear. That was his way. Never an ally, never a barrier. always neutral, always invisible. I took a deep breath, steadying the fury that threatened to rise. "Mom," I said calmly, "I've already started. I've accepted the scholarship. I've already made arrangements. This isn't a request." Her eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this. You think the world will welcome you. You're not ready. You're not." I cut her off, voice soft but firm. "I am ready. More ready than I've ever been. And I can't stay here anymore. I won't." Silence. It was heavy, thick, and final. My brother, Ethan, smirked, muttering under his breath about running away. Typical. The truth was, I wasn't running. I was escaping. I was leaving behind years of dismissal, favoritism, and invisible boundaries that had nothing to do with my capabilities. I was stepping into a space where my work, my effort, and my ambition could actually mean something. Aunt Eileen, quiet as ever, slid a small envelope across the counter later that night. Cash inside, enough for a plane ticket. No words, just a nod. Her support had always been subtle, never seeking acknowledgement, but always there. That nod was enough. That envelope was a lifeline. I packed my bags before dawn. The house was asleep, the only sound the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of settling wood. I left a note on my pillow, simple. "I'm gone. I'm fine. Thank you for everything. Mara." As I stepped into the chilly morning air, suitcase in hand, I felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. The world outside my Kansas City neighborhood was unknown, vast, and intimidating. But it was mine to explore, mine to claim. And for the first time, no one's approval was required. At the airport, I clutched the ticket like a talisman. Every step felt surreal. The realization hit. I had finally done it. I was leaving a family system that had measured worth in favoritism, and stepping into a future built on merit, skill, and opportunity. Flight attendants smiled, announcements played, and engines roared to life. I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the familiar streets shrink beneath me. The red brick house, the cracked driveway, even my mother's sharp gaze, all fading behind me. I felt lighter than I had in years. Free almost for the first time in my life. Arriving in Charlotte was overwhelming. The campus was alive with energy, laughter, and ambition. Students hustled across quadrangles, professors discussed ideas I had only read about, and libraries smelled of possibility. I was no longer the background noise. I was part of something bigger, something real. And yet, even with the scholarship and the bright promise of a new life, I remembered the basement. The late nights coding, the servers humming, the quiet victories. That space had given me more than skills, it had given me resilience. It had taught me to persist when the world said no. And now, that same determination was what would carry me through this next chapter. Leaving Kansas City wasn't just about distance. It was about claiming myself, demanding my space, and stepping into the life I had been building in secret. And as I walked into the lecture halls, registered for classes, and started this new journey, one thought stayed with me. I would never let anyone dictate my worth again. I was gone. I was unstoppable. And this was just the beginning. Charlotte was nothing like Kansas City. Here, the streets hummed with life, full of people who had places to go, things to do, and stories that didn't revolve around family politics or silent expectations. But starting fresh came with a price. Jobs stacked on top of classes, exhaustion pressing down like an invisible weight. I worked mornings at a cafe, afternoons in the library, evenings cleaning offices, anything to keep tuition covered and rent paid. Sleep was rare, caffeine my closest friend. One rainy Thursday, while hauling boxes at the warehouse job I picked up for extra income, disaster struck. A misstep, a slick floor, and I went down hard. Pain shot through my ankle like fire. I couldn't move. Coworkers scrambled, calling for help. The ambulance ride was a blur. My body screamed, but worse, my mind rattled with panic. How could I afford downtime? How could I recover and keep moving forward? At the hospital, the diagnosis was brutal. Fractured ankle. Weeks of immobility. Limited movement. The timing couldn't have been worse, final projects, coding deadlines, and part-time work all colliding. But life, as it always does, forced perspective. I realized I had to adapt. That's when Logan came into the picture. He wasn't just a classmate. He was the kind of person who seemed to exist in constant motion, ideas spilling out in streams of excitement and frustration. Logan had seen me at the coding club last semester and somehow remembered. He offered to help, ride me to classes, carry my gear, even tutor me in the afternoons. I was hesitant, proud. But accepting help became a lesson in humility, and a lifeline I didn't know I needed. Financial collapse loomed. Bills piled up while I was grounded, unable to work at the warehouse. The stress was almost physical. One night, I sat in my tiny apartment, laptop on my lap, ice pack on my ankle, staring at a blank screen. That's when it hit me, the idea that would change everything. BioPredict AI. A system that could analyze personal health data to predict potential injuries or health risks before they happened. I scribbled notes, mapped algorithms, imagined a prototype. The pain, the setbacks, they weren't just obstacles. They were the spark. Drew entered the story shortly after. Drew had a knack for finance and logistics, the kind of brain that could turn abstract concepts into concrete plans. Together, Logan, Drew, and I started working in my cramped living room. Laptops perched on every available surface, wires tangled like wild vines, whiteboard markers squeaking across walls. We were scrappy, exhausted, but unstoppable. Every small breakthrough felt monumental. Debugging code at 2 a.m., testing predictions, refining the interface. It all mattered. Slowly, the AI began to take shape, an extension of our late nights, our scraped knees, and the relentless drive to turn struggle into creation. The accident that had once felt like a curse became the catalyst for ingenuity. We pitched the idea to small investors first. Skepticism met us at every turn. "Who are you? How can a few students develop this?" they asked. But persistence won. Nights spent rehearsing presentations, refining the business plan, and perfecting our demo finally paid off. Funding came through. Enough to move into a small office space, rent servers, and hire a couple of assistants. The work that had started as survival now became growth. Through the struggle, I realized something crucial. Life doesn't wait for anyone, and neither should you. Pain, setbacks, accidents, they are part of the narrative, but they don't define the ending. We had transformed every obstacle into fuel, every hardship into a lesson, every failure into the blueprint for the next step. By the end of that year, BioPredict AI wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a functioning prototype, tested, refined, and ready for the wider world. Logan, Drew, and I were exhausted, but exhilarated. The late nights, the accidents, the financial panic, they all led here. And somewhere in the midst of chaos, I had discovered a truth I hadn't known in Kansas City. Persistence, creativity, and the right people beside you can turn even the darkest times into a launchpad for something extraordinary. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building, creating, and shaping a future that no one could dictate. And for the first time I could see that every setback, every broken ankle, every sleepless night had been worth it. The moment BioPredict AI started gaining traction, everything shifted. The tiny office that Logan, Drew, and I had rented felt bigger somehow. Not because the walls changed, but because our vision had outgrown them. Nights were still long, caffeine-fueled, and chaotic, but now there was a rhythm to it. Purpose. Every line of code, every test, every investor pitch was a brick in something larger than survival. It was creation. TechCrunch ran a feature on us. I still remember the email notification, my hands shaking as I clicked. From Basement Project to BioPredict AI. How 3 students are changing predictive health. My heart pounded reading the words. The article wasn't just about the company. It was about validation. Not from my mother, not from anyone who had overlooked me, but from the world. Investors came next. The cautious skepticism of the early meetings faded into excitement. Our small team grew. Engineers, data scientists, designers, people who believed in the mission as fiercely as we did. Drew handled the logistics with his usual precision. Logan inspired everyone around him. And I found myself at the center, not as a trophy or a shadow, but as a creator, a leader. And then came the acquisition. A national health tech company saw our potential and offered terms that were far beyond what we expected. I remember sitting in the conference room, signing documents with Drew and Logan beside me, the weight of every struggle and setback pressing gently but insistently on my chest. We had made it. Not by luck, not by parental approval, but by sheer persistence. We bought a lake house. Somewhere calm, serene, a space that felt like the opposite of my childhood. The lake reflected the sky in a perfect mirror, a place where mornings could be slow and intentional. This was ours. Our chosen family's refuge. Speaking of family, here is where life became unexpected. I had Logan and Drew, obviously. But then Raphael joined the team, a quiet genius with a sharp mind and even sharper instincts. Aunt Eileen, my quiet, supportive lifeline from Kansas City, moved closer, her laughter filling the house in a way my childhood never knew. Dr. Khan, an early investor and mentor, became more than that. He became someone who reminded me that guidance, not judgment, was what family should feel like. We started a foundation. A modest beginning at first, supporting students who had talent but lacked resources. The kind of opportunities one wished I had when I was 16, coding in a cramped basement with nothing but books and ambition. Seeing these students succeed, knowing that our foundation was giving them what I had fought so hard to find, was more fulfilling than any tech headline, any acquisition, or any paycheck. The success was intoxicating, but not in the way most people think. It wasn't just about money or recognition. It was about choice. Choice to define family. Choice to define home. Choice to define success on my own terms. Every call from a student saying they got into college, every message from someone whose project we funded, it reminded me why I had endured the struggle, why I had stayed up nights coding, why every broken ankle and every rejection mattered. And yet, every victory carried echoes of the past. Kansas City, my parents' house, the backyard parties, the silences, they were all still there, stitched into the corners of my memory. But those memories no longer dictated the present. They were reference points, not anchors. I had built something that my younger self could never have imagined. A chosen family, a thriving company, a life that I controlled unapologetically. In those quiet moments by the lake, watching the sunset ripple across the water, I realized that success wasn't the acquisition, or the funding, or even the press coverage. Success was this: waking up each day surrounded by people who believed in me, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Building something that mattered. Giving back. And most importantly, understanding that family is not inherited. It's chosen, nurtured, and sustained with love, respect, and shared purpose. Every late night in Charlotte, every broken ankle, every long bus ride from the library, it had led here. I didn't just survive. I had built. I had created. And finally, I had a family that reflected who I wanted to be, not who I was told to be. The invitation arrived in the mail like a trap wrapped in lace. My mother's handwriting sprawled across the envelope. Calligraphic, precise, undeniably hers. 60 years, Denise Collins. Please join us. I stared at it longer than I probably should have, the edges curling slightly from the summer humidity. Part of me wanted to tear it up immediately. Another part wanted to see the look on her face when I walked in. I debated it for days. Logan, Drew, Raphael, Aunt Eileen, they all gave the same advice. Go, but on your terms. Go for yourself, not for her. I couldn't lie. A tiny thrill ran through me at the idea. Not fear. Not dread. Thrill. Control. For once, I was deciding the narrative. The day arrived. Sunlight streaking through the Kansas City streets like gold dust. I parked a block away from the house, walking the last few steps with calm certainty. No rush, no hesitation. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me arrive frazzled. My outfit was simple, elegant. I wasn't trying to impress her, only to exist in her world for long enough to make a point. The backyard was familiar yet alien. Tables lined with lace cloths, champagne flutes sparkling in the sun, neighbors and distant relatives milling about, smiling politely. Denise stood near the gazebo, greeting guests with the same perfection I remembered. her laugh sharp and deliberate. Her eyes found me before I could approach anyone else. For a second she froze, lips parting just slightly. Then her smile slid into place, the one that said, "I'm in control here." "Happy birthday, Mom," I said calmly, voice steady. No tremor. No apology. Just fact. She blinked once, twice. "Mara," she said. Her tone was measured, a careful balance of surprise and practiced charm. "You came." "I did," I replied. "I wanted to see you. See how you've built this celebration." Her laughter rose, fragile and forced, and she stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You know, it's not too late to." I raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "No, thank you. I'm not here for an argument. Or a reconciliation. Just observation." Guests shuffled around us, sensing the tension without knowing why. Few whispered. Some shifted uncomfortably. I felt the old thrill, the one I had felt walking out of the backyard all those years ago, only this time magnified. She tried the old tactics. Slight jabs, subtle digs about my career choices, my independence, my life in Charlotte. But they fell flat. Her words, meant to wound, bounced off armor I had forged over decades. I didn't flinch. I didn't explain. I simply nodded, smiled lightly, and let the statements hang in the air, meaningless. After 15 minutes, I realized I had said all I needed to say without saying anything at all. No confrontation. No shouting. No tears. I had achieved closure without giving her the satisfaction of controlling the scene. Turned, slowly, deliberately, walked away toward the gate, feeling more powerful than I ever had in my childhood. The rest of the evening didn't involve me. I didn't linger for toasts, I didn't eat the cake, I didn't exchange pleasantries. I left the party, and this time there was no sense of loss. Only a quiet, profound relief. Thanksgiving and Christmas were no longer dictated by her whims. My table, the lake house, my chosen family, was where the celebrations mattered. Logan, Drew, Raphael, Aunt Eileen, and even Dr. Khan gathered, laughter and warmth filling spaces that had been empty for decades. The students from our foundation joined, sharing stories, hopes, and dreams. Every face reminded me that family is not inherited. It is chosen, nurtured, protected. And that's exactly what I had done. Sometimes I think about that backyard in Kansas City. The music, the laughter, the sharp sting of exclusion. And I smile. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because I transformed that pain into something real, tangible, something that mattered. I turned invisibility into impact, neglect into creation, and humiliation into liberation. Family, I realized, isn't about who gives birth to you. It's about who chooses to stand with you, who believes in you, fights for you, celebrates you. That realization didn't come overnight. It came after years of coding in a basement, struggling through setbacks, and learning who truly mattered. And finally, standing in my lake house, surrounded by love and purpose, I understood. The past was just context. The present, that's where life actually happens. And that's exactly the story I want to leave behind.